Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. Welcome back to the Offensive VBA series. In this video, we're going to be, building on what we covered in the previous video. The previous video essentially being an intro or a foray into creating VBA macros. And of course, this series is geared towards red teamers or pen testers. And the ultimate objective is to give you the knowledge and skills required to, again, craft VBAs for initial access, as well as a plethora of other tasks or objectives, right? In this video, and this is going to be quite an important video, we're going to be focusing on command and program execution, or program and command execution. This is quite seminal, or this particular video is quite important because, as you probably know instinctively, utilizing a Word or a macro-enabled Word document, let's say, for initial access or to give you a reverse shell, will ultimately require you to, the macro to execute a system command or a particular payload or executable. And this is something we'll be exploring in the next video, and we'll be exploring the process of, integrating PowerShell a little bit more into our VBA macros. We're going to be exploring that right in this video, but we're going to be taking a look at in the next video how to develop a PowerShell dropper. But with that being said, let's get started. As I said, I don't want to waste too much time, and we're going to dive into program and command execution with VBA macros. So we'll follow the steps outlined in the previous video. We'll just go ahead and create a blank document in Word, and I'm going to save this on my desktop. I'm just going to call it, we'll just call it, let's see, execution, and we want to save it as a docm file, which is a Word macro-enabled document format. There we are. And now we'll go into the developer tab, and we will open up the macros dialog here or menu, and we'll limit this just to the current document, and we'll create a macro. Really doesn't matter what name we use. We can just go for something like VBA execution or something like this. Just click on create, and we are in the VBA integrated development environment. So one thing that I mentioned in the previous video, fleetingly of course, objects as a data type, if you will, in VBA. So I want to touch on that before we get into any of the techniques that you can use to execute programs or commands. And of course we'll be exploring standard Windows commands and then PowerShell. But objects, generally speaking, in programming, are constructs that essentially represent or allow you to represent, entities. In the case of VBA and Office, they allow you to represent entities like, file, a document, application, or workbook. And the key thing about objects is that they have properties or characteristics, if you will. They have methods or actions and events, also known or referred to as triggers. So let's go ahead and cover that right now. So I'm just going to create a new subroutine here, and we'll just call it I'll just say VBA Objects, and let's go ahead and get that going. So given that this is a data type, we can declare a variable like, for example, and we can utilize the WScript or WScript.Shell method here to demonstrate this. So I'm just going to create a variable called obj shell or object shell, and this is going to be of type object. Okay, and now we're going to set the variable or the value of the variable obj shell, and we now need to, and this is sort of the key thing when you're dealing with objects. Again, remember, objects are essentially constructs that represent real world entities, and if let's say we wanted to use some of the methods, in this case specific to Word, or I should say Office or VBA, we would need to utilize create object. So we would say create object, not objects, and then we specify what method we want to call, and in this case we can use WScript, and we say .shell, and this needs to be encapsulated with double quotes, and then we say we can now instantiate methods like run, for example, native to WScript or WinScript, depending on how you pronounce it. So we'll say obj shell .run, and then we specify what we want to run. So if we wanted to execute notepad, notepad.exe, we can do that, and if we save this now, it should launch up Notepad. All right, and obviously, as I mentioned in the previous video, if we were to open this macro enabled document, there's a high likelihood, well, not high likelihood, this macro will not be executed, because again, we haven't called this subroutine. We could utilize something like auto open to do that for us, but again, that's beyond what I want to get into right now. So that's that's what I wanted to highlight with regards to objects, and the reason this is important is because you'll come across objects quite a bit when developing macros. But let's dive into program and command execution. So I just highlighted one technique, which is using the WScript or WinScript. But let's go back to the basics, or the rudimentary technique, which is the shell function, right? So what I'll do is let me just create a subroutine called we'll just call shell exec, something descriptive to a point. But what is the shell function? Well, the shell function is a built-in VBA function that can be used to execute programs and system commands on Windows. So the way you use it is fairly simple. The syntax is fairly simple. You just, specify shell. Of course, this is case sensitive, the shell keyword or function, and then you essentially tell shell what you want to execute. So I can say notepad.exe, or let's go for a classic one, calc.exe. And you can then specify some other options to do with, the execution of whatever you want executed. More specifically, the actual window, if you will. So we'll dive into this at the end of the video. But for example, I can utilize something like VB normal focus, and you'll see what that does. Now these options here are also, or can also be represented in the form of numerical values. And again, I'll not dive too much into that, but let's go ahead and hit save. And if I run this now, you can see calc brings up, it executes calc.exe, normal focus. If I went ahead, and this is very important, especially in the, from an offensive perspective, or from a stealth perspective, I should say. What if I wanted to hide the execution of calc.exe? Well, I could say something like VB hide, right? And I go ahead and run this now. And in this case, that should have actually hidden it. Let me see, VB hide. VB normal focus, VB hide. Let's see. So if I want VB hide, let's try and say, let's use the numerical value for VB hide, still brings it up. Normal focus would be 1. Yeah, normal focus, and then minimized focus. So if I wanted to minimize it, run still brings it up. That's very strange. Oh yeah, that's when we're using WinScript. In any case, we'll get to that shortly. So still using shell, that's, you know, how to execute a program. Let me just switch this back to what I had set there. What if we wanted to execute a command? So in this case, we can create another subroutine here called, you know, run command. And in here, we can then say shell, and let's say we want to use cmd.exe, so, you know, system command. And we then say something like, you know, echo hello world, you know, just the basic stuff here. And in this case, we can say VB normal focus, like so. And then we are just going to get rid of this. Actually, we can just call it. So call run command, and so there we are, calc, and you can see this executed. However, you know, because it's a CMD command, we still got the window, right? So if I run it again, why is that not opening up calc? That's very strange. Okay, there we are. Yeah, so you saw the command prompt window. If I now say VB hide, something like this. That's very strange. Let's try that again. VB hide. Call run command VB normal focus. Calc should have executed without any issues. Let me just try and debug this. Yeah, that should be okay. Okay, so 1 second. Let me just save that and run it again. Yeah, just a second. Okay, that's working. VB normal focus, call run command. Yeah, that should be fine. Let's go ahead and set this to as double VB normal focus. Oh yeah, 1 second. Those are the window options. Let me just check something here. Oh, that's very strange. Calc should execute. Shell exec run command calc.exe. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so that works without any issues. Anyway, so let's take a look at this particular subroutine here. We haven't been able to confirm that this actually happened, so we can actually try and verify this by outputting the value of the echo into using a redirector. So we can say C, let's store it in the temp folder, and we can just call it we can save it under output.txt. Okay, so let's stop that, run it again. Let's see this PC temp. That's very strange. Not reset. Run command. Yeah, that should work. Actually, let's get rid of this here. What if I save it on my desktop? So we'll go to users, admin, desktop. And let's try and save it here. So I think that executed. There we are, output. So the folder needs to exist. I forgot that. So we can see that that works, and you can then hide the window so it does not look like anything fishy is going on. Anyway, that's the shell function. Now, the reason I mentioned objects, as you saw, or as we did in the beginning, is going to become important now. So that's where, or that brings us to the WinScript or WScript.Shell object. So before we actually get into that, what is WScript referring to? Well, you may be thinking to yourself that sounds familiar, and you're right. WScript or WinScript is abbreviation for the Windows Script Host, or WSH. What is WSH? Well, it is an inbuilt Windows scripting environment that allows it allows you to execute scripts that are written in languages like VB script and JScript. And in the context of VBA, this particular object is part of the Windows Script Host, and it really provides more flexibility or functionality, I would say, than the shell function. And basically, at a general level, when it comes down to the Windows operating system, it provides you with a powerful interface to interact with the Windows operating system, and allows you to do a lot more things than you can do, let's say, with something like shell. So in VBA, or when you're writing VBA macros, you typically use WinScript.Shell or the WinScript.Shell object that's provided by the Windows Script Host to perform various system level tasks. One key thing to note is that it's not a standalone language or a host in VBA, but it's really another way to interface with the WSH functionalities directly or from within VBA. And there are two methods that the object allows us to utilize when it comes down to program and command execution. The first is run, and the second is exec. So in the case of run, this allows you to execute a command asynchronously or synchronously. And in the case of the exec method, this is very useful because it allows you to execute a command and then provides you with access, as we saw in the previous video, to input and output streams. So you can actually control or you can take output from a particular command and then display or pass that output in, let's say, a message box, if that makes any sense. So the bottom line is that the WinScript or WScript.Shell object allows you, when you're developing your macros, to interact with Windows, and allows you to execute commands, programs, launch files, applications, or even open up URLs. It allows you to modify environment variables. It also, and this is quite important, and we'll see that in the next video, it allows you to access and manipulate the Windows registry. So you can actually download or drop an executable or a payload and then configure it as an auto-run program, because again, you can modify the registry and get it to execute on system startup. So we have already covered how to use this. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new subroutine here called WinScript, something like this, and then we create a variable. In this case, I'll just call it, what we called it previously, which is going to be obj shell, and this is going to be as object. So we can then set obj shell, and then we create object, and then we specify, what we want. So we essentially creating an instance of WScript.Shell, and we specify it here. So WScript.Shell, this is case sensitive, obviously, and there we are. So we can now, pretty much do what we want, which brings us to the key execution methods that can be used. So I mentioned the first being run and then exec. So for example, in the case of run, I can say, obj shell, and of course we took a look at this, .run, and then notepad.exe, for example, and then we specify, the actual window option. So, whether we want it hidden, etc. And then we can also specify a couple of other things. So the syntax is fairly simple. We have the command or the program we want to run, and then the window style, which can either be the actual name of the window style or the numerical equivalent. So, if we wanted it hidden, etc., we can do that as well. And then we also have the ability to, we have an optional argument we can specify, and that is the wait on return argument, which, depending on what you set, will allow you to wait for, will essentially tell VBA to either wait for the command to finish executing or not. So in this case, we can say false, for example. I run this here. There we are. And now if I change this, you can see if I change this to true, it doesn't really affect anything in this particular case. This will become useful, or the importance of this will become apparent as we progress. But we also have the exec method, which is, gives us a bit more functionality, but is quite tedious to use. So what I'll do is, let me get rid of this. Let's use another example that'll allow me to show you the benefits of the exec method when using the WScript.Shell object. So I mentioned previously, or a couple of minutes ago, the fact that the exec method allows you to, access standard input, output, and also error streams. So I'm just going to create a new variable called output to manage output or to handle output. And this is obviously going to be of type string. And then we're going to create another one here, and we'll just say obj exec. This is going to be object, and then we're going to say set obj exec is going to be equal to obj we can just call it let's see, we can just say obj shell.exec, and yeah, and in here is where we would execute what we want to execute. So cmd.exe command echo, something like hello or something simple. And then we can use a do while loop. So we can say do while not obj exec dot standard out, so dot at end of stream. Yeah, that should be correct. And then we say output is going to be equal to output, and we're going to concatenate, so obj exec dot standard out dot read line. Okay, and then next we'll do a line carriage here that can be done using VBCRLF and loop. Okay, and then we can also use a message box to display the output or the value of output, the output variable. So let me go ahead and run this. Object require, my bad, I made a mistake. There we are. Yeah, I just call this obj access. Yes, so obj, made a mistake there. Set obj exec. I forgot. Yeah, I didn't make any mistake. I forgot to declare. Yeah, so we need to say set. We need to set actually we need to create a dim. Let's see here. Yeah, so I created yeah, so we're gonna say obj shell as object. Yeah, go ahead, and then I'm gonna say set obj shell and we're gonna say create object. Yeah, there we are. That worked, and we can now see. Anyway, just forgot to create the object to handle or to essentially allow us to access, you know, this particular object and its methods. So we created output variable or a variable to handle output, and then created two objects: obj exec, obj shell. Obj shell is what we use to execute the actual command here with cmd, and then we set obj exec to, you know, obj shell.exec, because, you know, now obj shell can actually call on the Windows script, the WinScript methods. So .exec being one of them, and we essentially execute it, and then we have a, you know, do while loop here, where we say do while not obj exec dot standard output at end of stream, and then, you know, output is going to be equal to output and obj exec dot standard out dot read line. So essentially getting stuff in, and there we are. So for example, we can also replace this with a command like ipconfig, and then run that here, and you can see it passes that out into a message box. So quite powerful. Now, if we wanted, let's say, to run a command asynchronously, and let me just create auto open, just so I can control a few things. I'm going to create, we're just going to call this sub async exec, you know, something like this. So we can say dim obj shell as object, and we're then going to say set obj shell is equal to, you know, create object, and then we call WinScript here, class is string, so WinScript.Shell, and we can then say obj, so asynchronous execution I think I already highlighted, but obj shell.run, yeah, and then notepad or calc.exe, the window options here, and then we can just set this to true, sorry, true, there we go. and then in here I will call async exec. There we go. All right, so now that we have that basis or that setup there, we can now actually proceed. So let's move on to executing PowerShell commands. So I'm going to create another subroutine here, and I'm just going to call it sub run PowerShell. I think we can just call it that. Let me just comment that out there. We don't want that to be executed. So how do we execute PowerShell? Well, we would need to use WinScript or WScript object. So we can say dim obj shell as object, and then as you know already, set obj, and you can use different variable names depending on your requirements. That's going to be equal to create object. And then now this is where things become different. We just say obj shell dot run, and then instead of cmd we say PowerShell.exe, and then command, and then in here we need to specify, in this case let's try and get a list of processes, and pipe this and say out file. Let's save it under, I believe I still have the path here. Desktop, and I will just call it processes.txt. There we go, and we can actually have this hidden, and then okay, and can I actually wrap here my code anyway? So let's go ahead and call this one, call run PowerShell. Okay, and let's go ahead and run that now. Okay, it is running. There we are, processes. Open this up, and there we are. We're able to dump the processes. So this is how powerful VBA is. And of course, you know, I'm sort of building or leading towards the reverse shell stuff, but you can imagine what can be accomplished with this. Again, you need not necessarily even you know, try and get a reverse shell, you know, from a malicious Word document or a macro-enabled document perspective. You can also, you know, just try and dump information, or, you know, execute stuff like that, or stage specific files that, let's say, would be you'd either plan on exfiltrating and stuff like this, but there you are. Okay, so one more technique that I want to highlight is in-memory execution of PowerShell. So I'll create another, yeah, my bad, that is a single quote. I will create another subroutine here called we'll just call it in mem exec. So in memory PowerShell execution. So well, we actually don't need to go through this process of typing this in. Sorry, let me just copy this here, paste that in there, and then now we would say obj shell.run, and then in here we can say PowerShell.exe, then no profile. So this is the PowerShell standards, or you know what you would typically do. So execution policy, we want to set that to bypass, and then the command in here we would essentially say system dot in this case system diagnostics process start. We specify what we want to start. So if we didn't want to use a script and we wanted to execute this PowerShell command in memory, then we can do that here. And I think the syntax is good, so we'll hide this as well. True. Okay. And in here, we'll now just say call in mem exec. All right, let's see that work. Actually, in this case, I hid it. My bad. So let's try and use the Windows style 1, which is essentially would be VB normal focus. That's weird. Notepad.exe. No profile, yeah, PowerShell.exe. No profile execution policy bypass, and then yeah, system.diagnostics.process, and then start notepad.exe. Let's try something else. Let's change this to hidden. I don't want to see the PowerShell window. If I go in here, let me just check something. So processes, what are we executing here? Calc.exe. If I say notepad.exe, I'm just going to minimize this or just resize it a little bit here. And I just want to see whether we're actually seeing any. We don't have Notepad open up. Okay, so let me just go ahead and save this in here. My bad, I forgot that I'm not supposed to concatenate or encapsulate it in single quotes. So let me show you this now. So if I run it now, you can see calc works, and that's executed in memory. Again, in this case, let me just set this to true again, just really quickly. Run that again. Yeah, that should be fine. And then if I say notepad.exe, there we are. Okay, fantastic. So in memory execution. So a few things I want to just point out here. And that is the actual Windows styles, more specifically for shell. So let me, I know this is getting quite messy at the moment, but let me create a new subroutine here. I'm just going to call it run shell, just with the run function. I just wanted to highlight that. So, you know, I brought it up, but let's say notepad.exe. This is very important because you, generally speaking, want to hide your windows. You don't want stuff coming up that looks eerily suspicious. So as I said, the Windows styles can either be written you know, in their constant value name or the, you know, the constant name, which would either be something like VB hide or something like this. VB hide is equal to 0. So you have VB hide, VB normal focus, which would be 1, and then you have VB minimized focus, which will essentially bring up the window as minimized, and then VB maximized focus would be 3. This displays the window as maximized, and then VB normal focus or VB normal no focus, this will display the window. That's the value would be 4, but this would display the window in its most recent size and position without focus. So for example, let me just use something a little bit more illustrative here. So, if I say we'll use calc here, so we'll use the numerical value, and I hit I'm just going to call this one here, run shell. Okay, and I'm going to execute this now. So you can see we use the first one, VB hide. In this case, does not seem to be working in terms of hiding that. Let's try Notepad just a second. Actually, let's try and maximize this. Maximized. Okay. That's very strange. If I say VB maximized focus. That is very strange indeed. Let's try Notepad. Yeah, that works. So I don't think we can do it with calc anyway. So maximized focus. Then if we try, let's actually demonstrate this. I'll demonstrate it to you. So if I set this to, let's just use normal focus. So the numerical value would be 1. So I'll now run this. Okay, normal focus. Now let's take a look at this tree here. Okay. And I'm just going to resize it so you can actually see that there. I'm now going to set this to 0 to essentially hide it. And then I'm going to run. Pay attention. So you can see it's open in the background. There's no window that popped up. This is very important as a red teamer to take note of. And then, of course, we did, let's try minimized focus, which would be, the value would be 2. So VB minimized focus. Opened up another one there. Let me just terminate these two here. Just want to confirm something. Yeah, minimized focus, and then we did maximized. We can also try 6, which would be VB minimized no focus. Yeah, so that minimized no focus, it opens it up, but it's minimized. All right. So those are the window styles, and VB hide, just to summarize, is useful for silent execution, especially when automating commands that really don't require user interaction. VB normal focus is typically used when you want the user to interact with the program that's been executed, and then VB minimized focused and VB maximized focus are really ideal for controlling the initial size and the focus state of the window. And then VB normal no focus and VB minimized no focus allow background execution without interrupting the user's flow. So that is, I know this has been quite a long video, that is command and program execution in VBA. And now we can start diving into the more traditional offensive stuff, like developing a dropper or a macro to, download and execute a payload and stuff like this. But one more thing, remember we have auto open. We always need to test and see whether I'm going to use 1 there just to see whether we can get Notepad to open up. I'm going to save this doc Let's actually confirm that it executes, and I'm going to resize my task manager here, but I'm going to open that up and I'm going to run the macro, and there we are. Works fantastic. Yeah, so hopefully you found this video valuable. If you liked this video, found value in it, please leave a like down below. If you have any comments or questions or feedback, please leave them in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching. That's going to be it from me, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.